All right. Good evening here and at home. Yeah. Oh, it's not too hot. Certain places. It seems to be hot in Europe. Yeah. Okay. So before we start with a little bit more of, okay? You can hear me okay? Oh, no. At home, you can hear me okay? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Also here? Yeah. Is it okay? No. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So before we start, generate correct motivation in order to understand more about samsara and nirvana, and well, for the purpose of getting out of samsara and achieve nirvana, and also, yeah, to help others to achieve the same, yeah, to lead others in that direction. And then think, yeah, so first generate that motivation for yourself. Yeah. Yeah. So then in front, imagine Sakyamuni Buddha surrounded by masters of India and Tibet and other Buddhist traditions, and surrounding yourself countless sentient beings undergoing individual suffering, and think it's your responsibility to do something about it, and you start that responsibility by leading them into prayer. Yeah.
To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. The indescribable, inconceivable, and inexpressible perfection of wisdom, unproduced, unceasing, the nature of space, object of the uniquely knowing transcendental wisdom, to the mother of the victorious ones of the three times I prostrate. Tayata gate gate paragate parasamgate bodhi soha. Tayata gate gate paragate parasamgate bodhi soha. Tayata gate gate paragate parasamgate bodhi soha.
Sangye
Chodan soke chonam la janje pate dani kyapse chi dage chune gipe sonam ki jola penche sange ju parsho sange chodan soke chonam la janje pate dani kyapse chi dage chune gipe sonam ki jola penche sange ju parsho sange chodan soke chonam la janje pate dani kyapse chi dage chune gipe sonam ki jola penche sange juba shu.
Yeah. So we have one more evening on samsara and nirvana, and why not talk about a little bit more about suffering? Yeah, is joking aside, but yeah, for some people it's a bit heavy stuff, so that's why I try to make it less heavy, but actually, yeah, eventually it is heavy, right? So it's just initially that the Buddha said, as we saw in the first evening, to let us wake up, that the Buddha said there's a problem, you know, and then there's a cause of that problem, and it's possible to solve that problem, and there's a method to it. Yeah, with the first evening, we went in the Four Noble Truths. Yeah, so that you could see that then it's good to know there's a problem. If you know there's something to be done and something that should be done, right? So for that purpose, the Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths, as we saw. Then also last week, we went into a more challenging topic or more complex topic of the 12 links of dependent origination. Yeah, so I will review that again today a little bit, and then you get a discussion session on it, and then you read a little bit more, and then you receive another lecture or teaching on it, and then slowly, the 12 links will sink in, right? So the 12 links is not something that you get in the first reading or in the first kind of presentation. Yeah, so that's kind of important to know that, as I said also last week. Yeah, so we went over 3 types of suffering in the first evening, remember? The suffering of suffering, like a headache or a fever, yeah, and we went over the suffering of change. Yeah, when it's too hot, you go into the shade or you put the AC on or whatsoever, or the fan, and then it gets too cold, and then you know, you want to head, yeah, or in the mountains, and you in the sun, it's too hot, you go in the shade, it's too cold. It's kind of, that's what we call the suffering of change. Yeah, or you're very hungry and then you eat too much and then you get a stomach ache and your mind gets dull. And yeah, it's suffering of change. Or you want to go somewhere and then have great expectations, but then yeah, it's not bringing the real happiness, so to say. Yeah, so there's suffering of change. Yeah. And then there's the pervasive form of suffering, as we discussed, being the most important suffering to be understood. So when the Buddha said you should know suffering, he was referring to the pervasive kind of suffering, right? When the Buddha said you should eliminate the cause of suffering, he was referring to this ignorance. Yes, we talked about last week, the ignorance that is the starting point of the 12 links. Yeah, the ignorance, we're going to talk about that in more detail when we're going to talk about the model on emptiness. Yeah, that's related with ignorance and how to eliminate this ignorance. Yeah, so that's kind of the very essential aspect. What should be eliminated, you know, when you talk about the pervasive form of suffering, because as long as you have karma and afflictions, there's no way out of suffering. And all afflictions are rooted in ignorance. Yeah, so as long as you have ignorance, there's no way out. Yeah, so that's kind of a very important aspect. We talked about it already a few times, and we come to that back later on today, and also when we talk about emptiness. So yeah, there's the 3 types of suffering. I put together on page number 2 of the little summary I make quickly for you. I mean, just copy paste kind of thing. On that same page, number 2, then there's also a few other sufferings. Yeah, there's a number into division into 7 or 8 or 6. Yeah, there's different types of suffering mentioned in the Lamrim text. And the suffering into 7 or 8 that we already discussed a little bit in the first evening, when I said the suffering of birth, sickness, aging, and death. Yeah, we call that the 4 rivers or the 4 currents of suffering. That we talked about. Birth is not that pleasant as it looks like. Yeah, we think, oh, little cute little born baby, oh, so nice and so cute. We think like that, but actually it's not so nice and so cute from the point of view of coming out yourself. If you come out of the womb, then it's quite a, you know, depressed, and then you come out of this darkness, and all of a sudden you come in this light, and you see all these eyes upon you, and then they put you on this kaza towel, on this towel, and it feels like sandpaper because you always in the womb, right? So and mostly they come out crying, right? So that means that birth is not that much of a nice experience. It's a very traumatic experience for the person who comes out, you know. So that's kind of quite that's kind of a contaminated aspect of existence. And then the hassle of growing up and learning how to walk, and you cannot express yourself because you know, you don't have the language, and sometimes you're hungry or thirsty and pain, and it's a very confused period. We don't remember it anymore. So then we think, yeah, okay. But if you're in that state, then there's suffering. That's what we talk about, you know. Then you get older, and then, you know, girlfriends, boyfriends, and splitting up, and what to study, what not to study, what to do as a job, and it's like, and then problems with parents or problems with friends. It's kind of nothing is perfect. When we see people sometimes on the street or on TV, especially the pop stars, so to say, they're always smiling. Yeah. On TV, yes, but in private life, that's not always the case. Once I was traveling in North India, and on one day I saw a very famous Bollywood star and His Holiness Dalai Lama, two different people, right? So this Bollywood star had a bodyguard, but when I looked at her, and when we were in Delhi, all the ground force making pictures. Oh, I don't watch really TV, and I don't know anything about Bollywood. It's similar as Hollywood, but in the Indian version. So I didn't know who this person was, but it looked like she was quite famous. But I looked at her and thought, she doesn't look very happy. Dressed in black, sunglasses, and, when she was the people, but we're not with the people around, and I saw the face showed a different aspect, so they didn't look very happy. And we know that most of these people in private life, they have a lot of issues, right? And they struggle with abuse, drugs abuse, and many aspects, so and the same with people, our friends. I think, oh, this person is so happy, oh, I look so happy, but you just have to talk for 15 20 minutes or an hour or so, and you find out everybody has problems. So that's kind of our growing up in life, and then sickness comes, and sickness is happening to us, right? When we're sick or depressed or mental difficulties, or physically we have a difficulty, that it just happens to us, right? There's at that time, no escape, although we don't like the sickness. Yeah, there's nobody who says, oh, great, I'm sick, I have a headache today, wonderful. There's no really person who says that, right? So, but it happens to us, and we cannot do anything about it. It's beyond our control. That's what we're talking about. Yeah, so birth, then growing up, and then the hassle of finding a job, and one other job, and don't like the job, and yeah, it's constant hassle in life, And then casa, then sickness also just happens beyond control. That's what it is. It's beyond control, because the control is not with us. The control is by conditioned cause and effect relationships. Nothing is random. A sickness has a cause. There's external conditions for a sickness, but there's also an internal cause for a sickness, right? Yeah. So that means as long as you have karma, negative karma that produces suffering and afflictions, there's no way out of suffering. That's what it means. So when you're sick, next time you should think, this is an unwanted form of suffering, and it's caused by a particular cause. So I have to give up this cause in order to eliminate sickness on the long term, right? Yeah. So that's what we call karma and afflictions. So as long as you have karma and afflictions, there's no way out of samsara. Then old age. Yeah, so you all kind of sickness, and then you just, people were really sick. They say, oh, I felt I was stuck in this body. I couldn't do anything, just experiencing the pain. And then you get old. Old age is also something beyond our control. We cannot stop decaying. Yeah, that's true. And then we all notice that physically and mentally, after a particular age, is down the hill. Basically, it's true. The body, things become more difficult. Mentally, things become more difficult. So, old age is going to happen to all of us, and that's a difficulty we have to face. Right? That's also beyond our control. And then eventually we die. And dying by itself can be a lot of suffering. Depends on the individual, right? Yeah. So if the mind is not well trained, then there can be a lot of suffering, because the I would say the unknown, so to say, and losing your friends and your family members, and other people in your life, you just have to go alone, right? That's for some people quite difficult, And then losing others, losing friends, losing family, So that's going to happen to all of us. There's no one who is being exempted from death and dying. When the Buddha, when this lady came to the Buddha, and she was so down, and her child died, and then the Buddha said, what happens? He explained, and then he said, okay, you go to all these families in this village, if you find one person who didn't experience death in their near surroundings, you come back to me and I will eliminate your suffering. But she found out that in every family there was at least one or more persons who actually passed away. And they had to deal with the loss. So that's kind of a reality we are going to face for sure. Yeah, the moment you're born, you're going to die. That's a given. So that's kind of, and that includes in many levels a form of suffering. Yeah, so suffering of birth, sickness, aging, and death. And that is what we call the four currents or the four rivers of manifest forms of suffering of samsara. Yeah. So that is kind of what we call manifest forms of suffering. Can I sit there? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No problem. So manifest form of suffering. So on page, there's a few other ones I'm gonna go over if you have 7 or 8 types of suffering. So then there's a suffering, what we say, separation from what is dear to you. That for example, you like to be with a person, or you like to have a particular job, but it's not possible. Yeah, so that means you get separated from something you like, and that also happens beyond control, right? It just happens to us, So we like to meet a particular situation, or have a particular job, or meeting or be with a particular person, but that's just not possible. So that's also beyond our control. And then on top of that, we meet with or encountering things we don't like. Yeah, we have to do certain projects we don't like, or we have to be with people we don't like, or we have to be in situations we don't like. Yeah, so if you're in a situation you don't like, but yeah, that's the contaminated aspect of samsara, to see that nothing is perfect in samsara, right? Yeah, so you don't meet the things you like to meet, and you meet the things you don't like to meet. Yeah, so that's kind of happens beyond control, yeah, and then never really being satisfied, or never really finding what you're looking for. You too, I think. I haven't found what I'm looking for, right? You too? Yeah. Or was it oh no, Rolling Stones was I can get no satisfaction. It was Rolling Stones, right? I can get no satisfaction. Yeah, there's many more like that. In Dutch, it was a group called Doe, means do it, I think. He was a very popular pop group when we were teenagers, in the 80s. And they had one song, and the song was, is dit alles? Meaning, is this everything? It's very interesting. I don't know the rest of the song, actually. I don't remember, and I don't know if they were referring to this aspect of samsaric suffering. Probably not. But but many people, to a certain extent, they see there's no satisfaction. They cannot find the things they want to have. And that's true for the most famous, most wealthy people on this planet. That's right. That, you can see people who are very wealthy, guess what they do? They pay a few $100,000 and they go for, I don't know, what is it, 90 minutes in space or something like that. Yeah, they go up and they come down, and then, I don't know, is 90 minutes? 90 seconds. Oh, that's very short. A lot of money. A lot of money for there's a kind of, they have this kind of few seconds or a few minutes of no gravity, so they go up in this rocket and they pay, and then the carbon footprint is, of course, beyond calculations probably. So they go do that for just, let's say, an hour or so. I think it takes a bit more than a few seconds, an hour or so, or less. And then they come back and say, oh, wonderful, I saw the planet from a distance and it was like this. But then for a few days they're broken, because the G-force that's pulling on your body is very tiring, most likely, so It's not really a satisfaction. It's just like, it's kind of people, they, and then they've done that. Oh, then I want to go to the moon or something. It's kind of, there's no end, right? You can see there is really no satisfaction to be found in samsara. There's no satisfaction to be found, to be more precise, in sensory perception or sensory enjoyment. Everything of the senses is not really producing happiness. The more you engage in the activities of the senses, you don't become happier and happier and happier. That's the thing, because the happiness actually comes from, kind of contentment, which is from mental consciousness, right? You can travel the whole world back and forth or visit other planets, whatever you like to do, but your mind is going everywhere, right? So if you don't train your mind, then the external conditions can never really bring the happiness. Of course, they play out. Can be a condition. Yeah, if you're stressed or depressed, you go for a holiday, then it can trigger, to have some peace of mind and then look back with a bit more clarity. Yeah, so that's why, it can be a condition, but it's never really the substantial cause for happiness. Yeah, so that's kind of a few aspects of suffering. So that's kind of 7 sufferings. Yeah, the 4 rivers, as we say, and then not meeting the things you like to meet and meeting things you don't like to meet and never being satisfied, right? That's 7. Yeah. And then number 8, Lama Tsongkhapa, is very, very interesting. Lama Tsongkhapa says, in short, or in brief, having contaminated aggregates, which is a very, very profound conclusion. Because we talked about that the most important suffering to be known, and the Buddha said you should know suffering, is this all-pervasive form of suffering, right? That means as long as you have a contaminated body and mind, there's no escape from suffering. Yeah. So what does that mean? Contaminated meanings with contamination means with afflictions. As long as you have afflictions, you basically, there's no escape from suffering. As long as we have anger, strong desire, jealousy, pride, in a particular ignorance, there's no escape from suffering. Yeah, so that's very important, because when Lama Tsongkhapa says, in short, having contaminated aggregates, as number 8 in this list, it goes to the essential point, right? That all these forms of suffering, these manifest forms of suffering we just talked about, yeah, of birth, sickness, aging, and death, and then mental sufferings of meeting things you don't like to meet and never meeting things you like to meet and never being satisfied. All those forms of suffering you can summarize into one aspect: having contaminated aggregates, or having a contaminated mind and a contaminated body. That means that as long as you have karma and afflictions, there's no escape for suffering. Yeah. So if you really want to generate renunciation, yeah, so renunciation is a mind that wishes to be free of suffering. Yeah, so renunciation is the motivation to achieve nirvana. Yeah, without renunciation, there is no nirvana. Yeah, renunciation is the motivation to achieve nirvana. Because if you don't understand samsara, how can you generate a wish to be free of samsara, right? So it's very important to first contemplate what is samsara. Yeah, that's why we talk about these aspects quite a lot. So then you see, as long as you have karma and afflictions, that propels various types of suffering, as we saw with the 12 links. Yeah, you first have this ignorance, then there is an affliction like anger or strong desire based on I, yeah, because I need this or I need that, or how dare this person say this to me? I am not like that. Yeah, so based on this apprehension of holding on to this self, then these afflictions arise, and because of that, those afflictions that arise, then we do all kind of negativities. We say something wrong to a person, we engage in harm, physical harm and verbal harm, and we harm ourselves because our mind is basically disturbed when an affliction is present. Yeah, so that's kind of, you can see that those types of afflictions cause suffering, and it's rooted in this ignorance of holding on to this I and mine, as we talked about before. Yeah. So as long as you have those aspects, then you're stuck in samsara. So we have to eliminate afflictions. We have to eliminate ignorance. Yeah, so that's two very important things that you should know, and that then we can go into at the end of the talk today into the method that leads us beyond samsara. Yeah, so that means we have to get rid of afflictions, and we have to get rid of the root of all afflictions, which is ignorance. Yeah, so that's kind of as long as you have those, then there's no escape of suffering. There's no escape of contaminated birth, sickness, aging, and death. Not just once, again and again and again and again. You know, so even people who are not very spiritual, when you talk with them about their life, and we talk about them with them about they're going to die, and then sometimes they ask the question, do I have to do this all over again? You know, when my father, yeah, I didn't know he had cancer at that time. That was somewhere in December, and in January next year they found cancer. So my mother was always kind of a bit interested, and she still is, you know, still interested in what her son is doing in Buddhism, because he's not completely crazy. She knows that a little bit, but not completely. So, and he's not completely stupid either. She knows that. So she reads about, you know, Buddhism a little bit. You know, she doesn't say I'm a Buddhist, but you know, she reads. You know, and she has a little altar and things like that. So you think about things. My father never said anything. My father, he met, you know, my teachers, a few of my teachers, but he never really showed any interest, you know. But once before he got cancer, we talked about various aspects of life. And then I was quite impressed because we never talked like that before. And then he said, you know, because he had quite a difficult last few years in his job was very difficult, and then and many other things in life. And then he said, you know, do I really have to experience over again? You know, so it was very interesting that even people who are not spiritual, they realize that certain aspects of life are unwanted, right? And that's true. So that as long as you've karma and afflictions, you have to go around and around and around in samsara and experience this again and again without end. We have done that since beginner's lifetime. We cannot remember it, but it doesn't mean it didn't exist. Right? So there's many aspects of the past we cannot remember, but you know, that doesn't mean that information does not exist. You know. So then my father, yeah, we talked a little bit, and then it was very interesting. I was quite surprised because we talked about death and dying, and I said, "Are you not afraid of death?" And I didn't know he had cancer, because after that was only 8 months left, I think. And then I said, "Are you not afraid of death and dying?" And then I was very impressed. He said, "I have a son. He's a monk. He would do praise for me." So it was quite impressive that actually behind the scenes, he was thinking about spiritual aspect of life, right? And also before he passed away, he wrote a very moving poem. It was very interesting that sometimes you have to think about life rather than just living your life and it comes to an end. You know, so that's quite, it was not really a very spiritual poem, but in the direction of you know, something that you should think about life a little bit more than just let it pass away and then you die. You know, so it's kind of yeah, I thought it was quite a nice poem, just like, what is it, a few sentences. Yeah. Okay, so that means that as long as you have karma and afflictions, you're stuck. So we have to do something about it, and we can do something about it, you know. So that means that we can do something about it. We can eliminate those afflictions, you know, and that's why we're here. I mean, I don't know, but that's why I am here, basically. Yeah, so that's kind of important. Yeah, there's a few aspects of suffering. Then another type of suffering is called, sometimes we call the 6 types of suffering. You know, there's just various types of suffering you can contemplate, you know, on a particular regular basis to understand. Yeah, now we go in the presentation, we just go through it, but actually you should try to contemplate the things step by step. Yeah, so last week we did a small meditation. So it's also important for yourself on a daily basis to find some time in the morning, as we went over the model on establishing a daily practice. Yeah, find some time in the morning and think about these things. Does this make sense? Is this true or not? Yeah, I said before, don't accept things that I'm telling you. You should examine if this is true or not. right? That's a very Buddhist principle, you know. And then by examining it, you get better understandings, right? It's very important to analyze, you know. Yeah, in modern times, critical thinking is maybe a little bit degenerating, I'm not sure, but it's very important to have critical thinking and analyze things, you know. Whatever you see on the news or whatever you read in books or whatsoever, analyze, is this true or not, and why, what are the reasons, you know. Yeah, so yeah. And then other few aspects of suffering, according to what my father just said, do I have to experience this again? There's one aspect we call the uncertainty of samsara. Yeah, so you have to think about a web. You know, you've seen the Matrix, or one of them. There's many now, I believe. Yeah. So the Matrix, people told me, and I saw most of the first film. I don't know if I finished. After I became Buddhist, I found it very difficult to finish movies, but I'm not sure I finished that one. But there's one aspect. It has an aspect, right, of taking the red pill, and then you get out of the Matrix, right? So but then all this violence happens. Yeah, so for us, if you take the red pill and you get out of samsara, there's less and less violence, right? Because you eliminate the destructive emotions, you know. But of course, these agents, you know, you could say these agents, they are kind of the afflictions or the habituation patterns that wants to draw you back. You could, you know, I mean, if you have seen that movie, you know what I'm talking about. Otherwise, don't worry about it. Yeah, it's better just to contemplate these things and read Lamrim books. It's more beneficial for your mind, you know. Yeah. So, okay. So then, this kind of uncertainty, the first aspect of this aspect of suffering. Yeah, of what I say, there's 6 types of suffering. There's an uncertainty in the sense, and this is I don't know how to bring it to people who are quite new, because last week, remember, we saw this circle of the different realms. Yeah, of the God realms, human realms, animal realms, spirits, and kaza, hell realms. Yeah, so if they all exist or not, you have to examine yourself. Yeah, I just give you the Buddhist presentation. Yeah. So then means that the uncertainty, because we have been around in samsara since beginner's lifetime. So we have done all kinds of things. We have all kinds of habituation patterns in our continuum. Yeah. Even if you just go back 40,000 years ago, if you think you've been always born on this planet, for example, if you take that into account, then you go down 40,000 years ago and you know there were no humans as they look at the moment, right? And so they were different. And the way they lived their life was quite coarse, you know, of fighting each other and many things like that, you know. And there's also other planets, you know, in this kind of, we have, according to certain calculations, we have 100 billion universes we can observe at a moment. This is quite a lot. According to certain calculations, 80 million of those, of 18 within those galaxies, yeah, 100 billion galaxies, there are about 80 million planets who are close enough to the sun, their sun, right, that water doesn't evaporate or doesn't freeze. So that means that according to certain calculations, there should be a possibility for life. So what kind of life? That's a big debate. So that's just only in our observable, you know, what we can observe at the moment, and we can only go to a few light years away, right? So that's kind of, we don't have, there's much more beyond that. Yeah, so you can imagine there's many other forms of life as well, and they will look different than the humans, you know. When they come here, they think, oh, there's earthlings. They look very funny, with 2 legs coming out there and 2 arms there. But when we look at them, then we might see the same thing. Oh, they look very funny. Yeah, it's just a habituation pattern, right? Because when you find a new creature some deep in the ocean, and then people say, oh, that's a funny creature. But you see that a few times, and you get used to it. You know, that's quite, yeah. Same with the first, when you do cross-culture things. Now, in modern times, everybody knows different places of the planet. But in the early days, when 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 Westerners came to Tibet, the Tibetans, there were certain remote areas, they were clapping their hands, So the Westerners thought, oh, yeah, I get a good welcome, but actually clapping the hands means go away, go away. It's for spirits to go away, right? Because those Westerners, the eyes are all in the inside, they're white in color. It's kind of, they thought it was spirits, So that means, if you haven't seen a particular type of being or human or creature or whatsoever, the first time you see it is very funny or scary but you get used to it after time, right? Yeah. So that means there's many other forms of life. You can be reborn. Yeah. Last week, we went over the different aspects in samsara, right? So that means that the first suffering in the 6 types of suffering is this uncertainty. There is no certainty where you are going to be reborn. There's no way you can say, I am human this life, I always be human. Yeah, according to the Buddhist logic and reasoning, that doesn't make sense. According to the science behind it, karma and cause and effect relationships, and a very complex pattern of cause and effect relationships, not just one life of 100 years, not just 2 lifetimes of 200 years, countless, infinite lifetimes. So that cause and effect relationship becomes very, very complex. In the same way, when you go to bed in the evening, it's not only for very few exceptional people. You cannot say, tonight, I'm going to dream that I'm going to the beach in Brighton. Yeah, you can. I mean, if that's for you kind of the thing to do, I don't know. The beaches in Spain are much more, how say, much nicer, right? Yeah. But now it's too hot there, so I'm not sure. I hope it's not too hot in Spain. Kyo is okay, not too hot. Yeah, yeah. Just like this, yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's also aspect of samsara, right? The kind of it's really true, uncertainty. Same with the pandemic, same with climate disaster, same with natural disasters as we see happening everywhere. It's this uncertainty. Nothing is fixed. Nothing is exactly as we expect it to be. Yeah. So we cannot say tonight I'm going to dream like this or I'm going there in my dream. That all depends on our habituation patterns in the mind, what we're going to dream. So dying is very similar as going to sleep. Yeah, you die, your consciousness leaves your body, goes into an intermediate state, and you are reborn. Yeah, so that's kind of what happens, So that kind of is a very, we always think, because we think there is an I, and we think that I is in control, but actually that's not really reality, because everything is dependent on cause and conditions. Yeah. So there's this uncertainty where to be reborn and who to meet, and yeah. So that's kind of a suffering, right? So people who always with each other and then want to be with each other for lifetimes, then they say sometimes you don't see each other for thousands of lifetimes, right? So that's kind of yeah. Why should you get attached or things like that, they say, yeah. So there's uncertainty, the first suffering. The second suffering is, as we talked about already, a kind of dissatisfaction, right? That the second type, that there's no satisfaction in samsara. Yeah. So and then in particular, what I said before, everything that is to do with sensory perception, there is no real form of satisfaction there. Whatever party you do, or whatever holiday you do, or whatever film you watch, or music you listen to, you finish one song and you want to listen to another song, or you want to have another song, and then another song, and then another song, and it's not like, oh, now I'm really happy, I don't need anything anymore. That doesn't really happen, right? So it's like drinking salty water when you're very thirsty. That's what it is. It's kind of, and then desire becomes stronger and stronger, craving stronger and stronger, and then there's no real satisfaction there. That's kind of what we call the second type in the 6 types of suffering. Yeah. And then, as my father also says, then when you die, then you have to give everything away, even your own body, So that's for some people quite challenging, because the body we is our home. It's like a guest house, so to say, for a particular period of time, right? So the body we have, let's say, last 80, lucky 90 years or something like that. That's it, and then you have to give it up, So if you're very attached, it's very difficult to give it up. You can see people fighting for not to die. And people who are dying tomorrow, they still think they're not going to die. Yeah, so that's grasping to permanence is so strong. And then people around the person who is dying, they say, you cannot die, you cannot die. It's not the right time. You cannot leave us, you cannot leave us. Right? So that's kind of, yeah, it's very sad, that you can see that's the suffering of death, that's, and it's true for everybody, when the time of death is there is no escape, there's no turning back, so to say, that's kind of, death and the permanence is very important meditation in Buddhist practice, and it helps you to be prepared to then you can accept it much more. If there's more acceptance, there's less sadness, right? That's why contemplation, death and impermanence is very essential. And it's an incredible motivator, because if you contemplate death and impermanence on a regular basis, you will move your mind into a spiritual path. We see that in the research on the near-death experience, that people will have experienced a near-death experience, and when they can talk about it and when it's accepted by others, the majority, and we talk about 80 to 90% of the people become spiritual. They become more compassionate. They become less attached to this life, and they're not afraid for death anymore. It's very interesting. Yeah. So contemplation of death and impermanence, it can be very, very powerful and very helpful. Yeah. Because then the third suffering in the 6 types of suffering is you have to give up this body, and not just once, again and again and again and again and again. Yeah. There's no end until you leave samsara behind. Yeah. Because that's the third aspect. Yeah. The fourth aspect in the 6 types of suffering, because you leave your body, because of the karmic connection, you have to retake a new body. Yeah. So again, you have to take another rebirth, so to say, with all the hassle of birth, sickness, aging, and death. Yeah. So this kind of, you give this body up, life is done. Then you start all over again with the same hassle. That's what it is. That's going on. In our past lifetimes, has been going on since infinite time, right? Since beginningless time. So that is going on again and again and again and again until we do something about it. Yeah. So that's kind of rebirth, taking rebirth again and again. Yeah, rebirth we talk about it quite a few times, so I don't have to go into too much detail from the science perspective and from the logic behind it, that consciousness can only be produced by consciousness itself. So we cannot really find a beginning as such. Yeah, so also with matter, the Big Bang is not a Big Bang, it's a big bounce, as we know, right? That's true. And then in Children Remembering Previous Lifetimes research by Professor Stevenson, very interesting phenomena. And then the near-death experience, a very, very, controlled environment. You can measure in an empirical way that there are states of enhanced forms of consciousness, as Pim van Lommel calls it, enhanced forms of non-local consciousness. At the time, there is no measurable brain activity. It's very, very, very interesting. So that means that the person in the cardiac arrest, when they do engage in CPR and try to bring the person back, when the person comes back, then the person can tell the story. Yeah, in many cases, not all cases, but in many cases. Yeah. But when the person doesn't come back, then Wim van Lommel said, what happens? Or other scientists in this field of the near-death experience, Bruce Grayson, for example, same thing. What happens if the person does not come back? Clinically, the person is dead, right? There's no heartbeat, no lung function, without 10 to 20 seconds, the oxygen flow to the brain stops and the brain dies. And there's only a few minutes of possibility with the CPR that the person comes back to life. Yeah. But if the person does not come back to life, what happens? That's a question. So that's what we call that the consciousness continues. That the consciousness continues and then goes into a kind of intermediate state and is then reborn. Yeah. So, and how is it going to the intermediate state and how is being reborn? That depends on the causes and conditions and the habituation patterns. So that's why we say, when you die, friends and family, and possessions, and even your own body cannot really benefit you that much. The real benefit when you die is your mental state. The real benefit is your habituation patterns in your mind. So that's why we say it's time to start training your mind now. That's what we say, because if you start to train your mind from today onwards, you prepare yourself. And then that's what Jasamila Repa, one of the great yogis in Tibet, who achieved enlightenment in one lifetime, he said, out of fear for death, I went into the mountains, and now I don't fear death anymore. That's very interesting. So that's contemplation, death and impermanence is a very strong motivator. Yeah, many people, they end up in spirituality because they close to death or had an accident or saw a lot of suffering or saw a lot of sickness or saw people dying a lot. Yeah, so that's kind of, yeah. So then you're reborn or respawn, respawn, is it? Respawn, yeah. The games, yeah, I told you about last time. I think last time we talked about it, right? Yeah, a few little kids on the street asked me about rebirth. And then they said it's like this, but I didn't know because I never played with a computer game. So I have to ask other people what it means. But yeah, it's slightly different, of course, but yeah. Yeah. Okay, so then you reborn, and then having taken rebirth, then you go from higher states to lower states, as we say, that means that you be born as that's what it is, right? Well, that what propels us in other future lifetime is previous habitational patterns, that's what it is. And then you think you're always being born human, but you just go down 40,000 years and you see this was completely different. Yeah, so that's kind of, if you see that it's possible to be born as an ape-like creature, yeah, like 40,000 years ago, then maybe it's also possible to be born as a tiger or as a snake or as a cat or a dog or a rat or whatsoever. Yeah, anyway, there's just a few options. There's many more. Yeah, so many options. Sorry, this came out like that. Yeah, a mouse is very interesting. He's sometimes very clever. I was in retreat in Dharamshala, and I always look at the monkeys. I never do meditation, but so and I was in retreat, and then there was a mouse behind the glass, and the mouse was very clever. The one behind the glass, there was a statue, and then it was making a nest behind the statue. And there's some offerings there, 100 rupee notes, 500 rupee notes, and the mouse took the 500, not the 100, no, yeah, the 100 rupee notes straight away, 200, and then nibble this down and make a nest, right? Yeah. So then, yeah, I don't know why I tell the story, but yeah. Yeah, they think they're clever, but actually they're just stuck, right, in samsara. Yeah, so forget the story, okay. Yeah. But yeah, there's many, many possibilities, so to say. But yeah, certain possibilities are not that, quite a lot of suffering. That's why we contemplate these things, to see, in the real traditional Buddhist presentation, because I said before, I'm a kind of traditional person, and it's my responsibility also to keep the Dharma pure, right? You can water things down as much as you like, but it's important to get the pure understanding of the traditional, authentic form of the Buddhist teaching. And then what you accept or not, that's up to the individual, right? So if you say, oh, I don't think so, being born in the Mao is not possible, then you think about it a little bit more, you put it aside, no problem. There's no issues in Buddhism, right? You can take out the things that are beneficial for your mind. Yeah, but there are people who like to hear more about, the authentic explanation. So that's kind of me also responsibility, right? That I have to talk about those things. Yeah. Okay, so then rebirth, and then you go from higher states to lower states without end. That's what we call the cycle of rebirth, right? There's no end to it until you eliminate afflictions, until you eliminate ignorance. Yeah, so that's kind of, yeah. And among the 6 types of suffering, there was number 5, going from higher states to lower states. And then number 6 is you have to experience this all alone. Yeah, when you die, there's nobody who holds your hand and goes with you as a friend. Even if you die with 2 people in a car crash, two different consciousnesses have different kind of connections with previous lifetimes. So they go to different kind of intermediate states, or sometimes they meet. It's very interesting. In the near-death experience, for example, there was one person who got a cardiac arrest and went into the intensive care, and then she got saved. Then she came out and she came back and she said, my brother, what, I forgot the name, but you check, it was the other way around, actually. I think it was the brother and the sister were somewhere. Yeah. So the brother came back to life, and then the sister was somewhere else and also had an accident. Yeah. And then he said to his parents, what has happened to my sister? I saw her, something happened. So they straight called, and actually she also had an accident and she died. She didn't come back. It's very interesting. So that's, some sort of subtle forms of consciousness you can see and be more connected with things like that. But anyway, so, but then when you die, you go all alone. So that means that's why we have to train our mind, because it's our mind or our consciousness that goes. That's why the Buddha put so much emphasis on training the mind. Yeah, that's important. Yeah. So then you die, and then you go somewhere else. And that repeats itself again and again and again and again without end. That's what we call the cycle of samsara. Yeah. Unless you do something about it, and that's probably why we're here. Yeah. So in the 12 links of Kasa, the 12 links of dependent origination we went over last week, that just to recall, because of ignorance, this grasping at this self, then afflictions arise. Attachment or desire or anger, jealousy, pride, all kind of aspects, and then that leaves a potential in your mind, right? We talked about that every action we engage in and every action that comes to an end, that information is not lost, as we say. And there's a lot of scientific backup for this. I think last time I talked about hypermencia, I talked about here, right, or not? Did I know? Did I? BP. So I find a very interesting form of research. There's only a very few cases, but in hypermencia is a kind of a phenomena that people can remember everything out of their daily life. You give them a date and a year, and they say, was this, and this goes 10 years back, 20 years back, random dates, right? And they say, it was a Friday, it was sunny, and we went to the beach, and then this was on the news. And the things on the news, you can check, right? So there's a lot of research being done with these cases. Some people can remember more than others, but there was one lady who could literally remember every single date she was asked for. And then there was one TV show, a lady was with a book with, the news over the last 10 years or whatsoever. And then she looked in the book and said, actually, you're wrong, because it's not on that date. And she, with complete confidence, she said, I'm not wrong. And because he knows, right? And then people backstage, they Googled it and he said, the book is wrong. That's very interesting. So that means that we don't remember. If I ask you the question, what did you do on the 13th of July at 7:30 in the evening, 1999? You don't remember, right? Or do you? Yeah. So that means if we don't remember, that doesn't mean that information is not there. Because these people who remember, for them, that information can be, they have access to that information. We don't have access to that information, but that doesn't mean the information is not present. Does it make sense or not? I find this, because also we all struggle with karma is a very difficult topic, you know, but if you think about scientific angles, it's very helpful, you know. So in a similar way, when you get karma abiding, when you get a mind that is capable of concentrating on an object according to your wish. Yeah, so there's people who can stay in calm abiding for hours, days, weeks, months without food, drink, or going to toilet. Because yeah, if you don't take food and drink, you don't have to go to the toilet anymore, right? But then they abide in this incredible blissful state of the mind, which we call calm abiding. Yeah. So one of the achievements, if you have that calm abiding, is, for example, different types of clairvoyance. You can remember various aspects of your life, yeah, very detailed aspects. And then some types of clairvoyance even go to previous lifetimes. So it's a very interesting phenomenon. But also people who are dying, and that we can see in the near-death experience, that when the mind gets more subtle, there's much more capacity of understanding things or knowing things. So in most cases of the near-death experience, there's a life review. Within a few seconds, people just review their entire life in great detail. Yeah, we know time is subjective, you know, and in a dream of a few split seconds, we can experience so much what will take days in a waking state mind, right? In a similar way, in the near-death experience, where the mind gets very subtle, then people have this live review. In most cases of a near-death experience, that's been very well documented, right? So that means that there's a lot of information we just don't know at the moment, but that doesn't mean that information is not there. And that's, I find it very helpful, because everybody, including myself, karma is very, very difficult to understand, because it's a very hidden aspect of reality. Yeah, as David Bohm, for example, one of the greatest physicists of modern times. David Bohm, he talks about, in quantum mechanics, about hidden variables or implicate order. Yeah, so it means there is something we cannot measure at the moment, but there's a reality. And that reality interacts with the things we can measure. And that's a very interesting aspect. So karma is kind of a hidden variable in one way. Certain aspects of karma we can understand. Yeah, when you get angry, that disturbs your mind. Yeah, that's an aspect of karma we can relate to and understand. But that karma that we get sick, and when and where was this karma being created? To get a headache or get a fever or get cancer or heart attack. Where and when was this particular cause created is very, very complex. Yeah, so that's kind of what we call a hidden variable. Yeah, so in a similar way, in quantum mechanics, in David Bohm's kind of theory, and he was a genius, you know, from the point of mathematics. He was a kind of incredible genius, you know. So he proved this all, right? It's very interesting. These hidden variables and the implicate order, as he calls it. That's very interesting material. For if you really want to know more about karma, then to see in science we have very similar aspects. You know, so karma is not something magical or something only religious or something, or only people who follow religion they relate to it. No. Karma is just a cause and effect relationship within the continuity of consciousness, right? So we have also cause and effect relationship in the external world, you know, and there's all kind of information that carries over time and can be remembered. In these cases, where people who can remember so many things about their life, you know. So this is all kind of, it sounds a bit complex, but yeah, things are complex. You know, reality is very complex. I mean, most of space is made out of black matter, you know, more than 80%. They still don't have a clue what black matter is all about. That's why they call it black matter. In gene therapy, we also think we know so much, but actually the majority of how genes functions is also what we call it kind of the black genes. Is a kind of, they don't really understand certain aspects. When we come to neuroscience, just a question: where is memory stored? How is it being remembered? And how do people forget? Those three questions, very, very difficult to get an answer. So we all knew, neuroscience is new, quantum mechanics is new. It takes a lot of time. And maybe we don't have the right methodology at the moment to know all those things we don't know yet. So that's kind of a few things. Anyway, so that you can know and understand that there are things in Buddhism that are also aspects that we don't know, and that's okay. It's okay not to know everything, right? So that's kind of an important aspect. We should have this kind of attitude. We try to examine it, but we also should accept that there are aspects of reality we just don't know. That's also in science the case, right? That's everywhere the case. Yeah. Okay, so then because of this activity that is motivated by ignorance and an affliction, we engage in an activity, right? Either we do something physically, or we do something verbally, or something mentally, and that activity leaves a potential behind when it comes to an end. Yeah, so that's why we can remember things, because the past activities are past, but we can remember things, and some people can remember everything. So that means that activity that comes to an end, that information is not completely lost. Yeah, that's what we talk about with karma. Yeah, so that's with physical things, with verbal things, with mental things, that information is lost. So okay, that's where we say there's various interpretation, but we try to keep it as simple as possible. So those kind of potentials, so to say, they planted in this consciousness. Yeah, it's kind of a field, and there's various seeds in there. Yeah. So that is our consciousness, very similar. And then when we die, as we went over last week, then these forms of attachment, like craving and grasping, they activate that actually seed. Yeah, they put the fertilization, heat and moisture, and then the seed, they start to grow. Yeah, so that means when you die, you activate these kind of potentials you created in the past, and that propels you into a kind of rebirth. Yeah, as we discussed in the 12 links before. So yeah, so there's a few aspects in the 12 links that creates the initial. Remember, we said throwing karma or propelling karma, right? So that's the potential. The throwing karma or the propelling karma is a potential in our mind that we have created by activities, yeah? Either positive or negative. Yeah, either, for example, you kill a mosquito, or you make a donation to a charitable organization. Yeah, so there's positive things and negative things. So then that activity is finished. That leaves a potential, and that can come to ripening at the time of death, for example, right? So that's kind of how that works. And then it gets activated. Yeah, so that's kind of, the activities are quite small, but yeah, maybe think about more, because to have a throwing karma, you need quite a solid form of strong karma. So think about killing a human being, right? Yeah, think about those things as more heavy negative karma. Killing a human being and practicing morality for 10 years. Let's do it. Let's make it something substantial. Yeah. So killing a human being is a negative karma that can throw you in lower states of existence. Yeah. Practicing morality for 10 years can throw you in a precious human rebirth in the next life. So then after you finished the 10 years of morality, or a few years of morality, even if you practice pure morality, and then and after you finish the killing of a particular individual, there's two types of karma there, right? And we have engaged so many activities since beginner's lifetime, so that comes to ripening at the time of death, and that propels you another rebirth. So sometimes the karma of, if the mind, that's the thing, if the mind is negative, you activate negative karma, right? It's very true, right? If you fall asleep with a state of mind that is very irritated, and state of mind that wants to take revenge, or a state of mind that really wants to do something about an annoying person and is very upset with it. The moment you wake up the next morning, you're not really rested in the sleep, right? And so that means our mind before going to sleep propels our, sleep period, and when we wake up. So in a similar way, when you die, then certain karmas gets activated and it propels you in a particular rebirth. Yeah, so that kind of that aspect of the first three links of ignorance, karma, and consciousness, that's what we call the propelling karma or the throwing karma. Yeah, that's kind of the propelling or throwing karma that has the potential to throw you another rebirth. Yeah? Either good by depending on positive karma, or negative by depending on negative karma. Yeah? So that kind of throwing karma that gets, we say that gets activated at a time of death, yeah, with grasping and graving and grasping. Yeah. So with graving and grasping, that's get activated. And then we say the link of becoming. So becoming is what we call establishing karma. Yeah, it establishes that potential. The potential you have planted at the link 1, 2, and 3, right? It's propelling karma that gets established at the time of death. And so you activate it, and then the same as a seed, the seed is there. If I put a seed on this table, nothing will happen. But if I put a seed in the ground with some heat and moisture and fertilization, it will grow, right? So in a similar way, that karma comes to ripening, and then that's what we call the kind of graving, grasping, and becoming, yeah? The establishing karma, as we say. And that throws you another rebirth, and then you get a body, you get a mind, you get these 6 sources as we talk about. There's contact, there's feeling, and then there is birth, aging, and death. And then you die again, and then the same thing over again. See, that's kind of the 12 links is propelling us in various states of rebirth, so to say. Yeah? So it doesn't mean that whatever you create in this life will ripen in your next rebirth. It's not that straightforward, It's not really true, because you have to think this kind of incredible web of various relations and correlations and cause and conditions. If you think about every minute, there's mental activity, right? So every minute we create karma. Every second there's mental activity. So every day we create various forms of physical, verbal, mental karma. That's every day. So 2 days, 100 days, 100 years, 100 lifetimes, billion lifetimes, infinite lifetimes we are beginning. You can imagine it becomes a very complex system of cause and effect relationships and potentials and various seeds, for example, right? So you have this, think about the whole universe filled with seeds, right? So there's seeds for a corn plant, there's seeds for a rice plant, there's seeds for an apple tree, and there's seeds for a banana tree. And it's kind of, if you think like that, right? So then it's just a matter of fact which seed gets to ripening first. That depends on many causes and conditions. Yeah, which seeds drops at a place where there's the right fertilization, heat, and moisture, and it can grow, right? So the karma is very similar. We have this huge amount of seeds in our continuity of consciousness. It's not matter. Yeah, it's not consciousness. It's kind of this hidden reality of karma, right? So we call, technically speaking, I say it and then you forget, okay? Non-associated compositional factor. You forget. Yeah, but later maybe we can study that. That's kind of one level of reality that is an impermanent phenomena, which is not matter, it's not physical, and it's not mind. Yeah, so there are realities like that. And also in quantum mechanics, we talk about very similar aspects of information that is carried over time, or in biology, or in neuroscience, very similar aspects. Yeah, okay. So so you have all these seeds, or these imprints and these potentials. So it's just which comes out and which gets ripening is a very complex system. Yeah, you can imagine. If you have 100 lifetimes, you can imagine it's very complex. If you have 1,000 lifetimes, you can imagine even more complex. Yeah, if you have then 1 billion lifetimes, it's even more complex. Every different activity has a particular seed. Yeah. So if you have every few minutes an activity, then you can calculate how many seeds you have, right? So there's a very complex system. You know, karma is that way. That's why it's very complex. Yeah. So that whatever is being activated by craving and grasping, that produce the potential, yeah, to becoming or the establishing karma, as we say, and then you're reborn, and then there's again birth, sickness, aging, and death, and all those kind of aspects of life. Yeah, so that's kind of the bad side of the story. So let's go to the good end, happy ending. Yeah. So a happy ending. I mean, there's a happy end, and it's possible. It's just a matter of fact of putting some effort, because there's a possibility of eliminating the 12 links. There's a possibility of eliminating karma and afflictions. Yeah. So so this is important. This is the root of the Buddhist teaching of getting out of samsara. Yeah, we classify sometimes the Eightfold Path. Some people were familiar with the Theravada tradition, but we can summarize the Eightfold Path into the 3 higher trainings. Yeah, so the 3 higher trainings are very important in the path to liberation and enlightenment. So what are those 3 higher trainings? Yeah, so the 3 higher trainings, the first one is morality. Without morality, there's no way out. Yeah, so morality, first one. So what does that mean, morality? Morality is abandoning negative deeds. Negative deeds that harms yourself and that harms others. And that's the meaning of morality. Yeah. So the Buddha was so skillful. The Buddha was so skillful. The Buddha was this enlightened being who could see everything. All these difficult things of karma we find difficult, the Buddha completely understood. Yeah. So then the Buddha said, okay, what is the purpose of life? You could ask the question. If you're wise, you say, happiness, wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. Okay, very good answer, the Buddha will say. Okay, so, and then they say, Buddha, please, please establish this. Then the Buddha says, sorry, I cannot take away your suffering. I cannot give my happiness to you. I cannot, wash away your sins, so to say, but I can show you how to do this all. And then he said, the 3 higher trainings, that's the key. First, practice morality. Why? Because if you want to have happiness and you don't want suffering, what you should do is prevent yourself from creating causes for suffering and practice causes for happiness, right? So then the Buddha said, practice morality. Because if you practice morality, you're abandoning the causes for suffering, like killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, for example, right? There are things that harm others, yeah, and yourself. So you promise not to engage in those harmful activities. That's what we call the practice of morality. Yeah, the practice of morality of physical activities, verbal activities, of not lying, for example, right? Or no verbal abuse or harshful speech or senseless talk. Yeah. And then the mental abandonment, which is a little bit more difficult, right? Not having a harmful intent and not having, how do you call it again? Some covetousness, we translate, right? Yeah, covetousness, and then kasa, and then wrong views, right? Or ignorance, so to say. Yeah, so there are the negativities of the mind. So if you practice morality, you eliminate the negativities of body, speech, and mind. That's the practice of morality. And that's why morality is so essential. Because if you practice morality, you just don't harm self and others in this life, and you create causes in the future lifetimes to have more happiness, right? Because you create causes for happiness. So morality is very, very essential. There's various forms of morality all across the globe. But when we talk about the morality within the Buddhist, how it's within Buddhism is defined, is a morality that is based upon the law of cause and effect and understanding of that law of cause and effect. And then the Buddha said, okay, killing is harmful. Don't engage in killing. It's harmful to you, it's harmful to others. So don't do that. So you prevent yourself from creating causes for suffering. Yeah. So that's why practice of morality is very, very essential in the Buddhist practice. Without morality, nothing else will work. Yeah? So morality is kind of the basis of the Buddhist practice. It goes to the extent when the Buddha was passing away, and Ananda and other disciples of the Buddha, they said, what do we do without a teacher? You know, then the Buddha said, morality is your teacher. Yeah, so there's a very clear distinction or clear message the Buddha gave when he was passing away. Because if you have morality as your teacher, you guide it perfectly. There's a perfect guide because you don't engage in creating causes for suffering, and you don't harm others, and you don't harm yourself. So actually, you only create causes for happiness. You know, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who a few of you know, I've talked about already a few times, who recently passed away. So an aspect of passing away. So Rinpoche was kind of 24/7. He didn't sleep, maybe 10 minutes, and that's from his, as far as people know Rinpoche, right? So that's a very interesting aspect. Can you imagine? For us, just going without sleep for a few days is very challenging. People probably get crazy. But Rinpoche never sleeps. Sometimes 10, 15 minutes in the car, something like that, and never lays down either. You know, since he was in his early 20s, that's as far as the records go. Never, you know, when we go to sleep, we lay down, right? Rinpoche always sitting like this, you know, day and night, and then of course going somewhere and then walking, right? But but never laying down and never sleeping. That's quite an achievement, you know. You have to be quite realized to do something like that, you know. And then Rinpoche was going day and night with projects and working for beings, charitable things, schools, hospitals, social services, Buddhist education programs. Like we have about 160 plus centers and projects across the globe, right? So Rinpoche was the spiritual director of all of this, you know. So then he was kind of working 24/7, basically, and always very relaxed. And if you was a Rinpoche, he had all the time. You know, to have a meal took hours. You know, every Rinpoche took time for everything. Everything should be done quietly, perfect, and very relaxed. You know? But Rinpoche was capable of doing so many activities. And then once his attendant for a few decades, Vemba Roger, asked Rinpoche, you know, does Rinpoche not need to relax and something like that? When the question came up. And Rinpoche just ignored the question. And then the next question was, what actually is relaxation for Rinpoche? And then Rinpoche said something very interesting. He says, abiding in morality. And that's very true, because if you abide in morality, you don't have to worry about things because you go in the right direction. You live in accordance to this law of cause and effect. So that's why morality is so essential. Another aspect of morality, why morality is the basis, yeah, in relation to the second higher training of concentration, in order to concentrate or to get a mind that is capable of concentrating on an object according to your wish, you need two very powerful mental factors. I think we talked about that in the beginning of the course already and a few times after, that alertness and mindfulness. We talked about those two mental factors quite a lot. Yeah? So meaning if you're concentrating, yeah, and also when we do meditations, we talked about that. We do the meditation counting the breath, right? We always talk about have alertness and have mindfulness, meaning when the mind drifts off, you alert of that, and with mindfulness, you bring your mind back. Yeah, so those two mental factors, alertness and mindfulness, are essential for developing concentration. Without those mental factors, you just cannot develop concentration properly. Yeah, so you need to develop those two mental factors. So how do you develop those two mental factors? You develop them in a very sophisticated way when you practice morality. Because if you practice morality, you say, oh, I cannot do this, and I shouldn't do that, and I should do this. Yeah, that means when there's an opportunity to kill, or when there's an opportunity to harm, or then you automatically know, no, I shouldn't do this. So there's alertness is there. And mindfulness remembers the instruction, if I do this, it will harm myself and harm others. Yeah, so that's kind of why alertness and mindfulness in morality are, you train them, because you constantly think, okay, It's true, right? In the morning we set a good motivation, and then we think, yeah, oh, this person again, I have to meet this person. But today I'm not gonna lose it. Right? I mean, we can put that intention in the morning. Yeah. I'm not gonna lose today. Yeah. Yeah. And then we try. And then we go and we step and we see this person, and this person starts talking to us. So we be very alert, right? And then when the person says something and you feel the irritation coming, and then with mindfulness, you remember, if I follow this irritation, what I'm going to say to this person will not be constructive. So, I don't follow that. So then you can see, then you practice alertness and mindfulness, right? Yeah. And then so with morality, it's very true. Every aspect of not harming self and others, if you're more aware of that, then you're constantly aware and you have alertness as soon as there's a danger of losing it. And with mindfulness, you remember you shouldn't do this, right? That makes sense. Yeah. So those two mental factors you train in morality. Then when you sit down and you try to generate concentration, then you need those exactly two mental factors to discipline your mind, right? So to discipline your body is much easier than to discipline your speech. To discipline your speech is much easier than to discipline your mind, right? It's much easier not to punch a person in the face than to say something nasty to the person, right? It's easier to not punch, but just say something. Yeah. And it's easier not to say something than to have a negative thought towards the person, right? Yeah, it's easier not to say something, but the negative thought is a bit more challenging to prevent from happening. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. Yeah. So you practice morality. That in one aspect, morality shapes your continuity of consciousness in the sense that you prevent creating new causes for suffering, right? Yeah, so you're actually on the path to eliminating suffering in one way. Then you train in those two mental factors, and with those two mental factors, you can get concentration. Yeah. So why do we need concentration? Because we have to have the third higher training, and that's the higher training of wisdom. Yeah, so you have the higher training of morality, which is the basis. Then the second training is a higher training of concentration. Yeah, so without concentration, you cannot really meditate properly. And if you cannot meditate, you cannot change your mind properly, right? You need the concentration to change your mind. Yeah. So yeah, the high training of morality, then the second high training of concentration, and then the higher training of wisdom, the wisdom realizing emptiness. So what emptiness is, we're going to talk about later, but at the moment you should know it's a mind, wisdom realizing emptiness, that eliminates ignorance. Yeah, so that's kind of, we need a lot of wisdom to eliminate the destructive emotions, or we need a lot of wisdom to eliminate afflictions in general. So the wisdom is kind of, the wisdom realizing emptiness is the key. Yeah, once we were also in Battersea Park another time, and then one guy asked me about, do you also do keys? I was a bit kind of, what? But yeah, we do keys, keys of the mind. I don't know what he was referring to, but yeah, anyway. So my mind is a bit stupid, and yeah, I'm kind of crazy. That's why. Yeah. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. So Kasa, what did I say? Yeah, then I just get this thought in my mind and to talk about it, but it does make sense. Wisdom, yeah. So I need more wisdom, you see. So so this wisdom realizing emptiness is this incredible realization of ultimate reality, as we say, that sees how things actually exist. And that wisdom is eliminating this ignorance. So you need this eventually, this high training of wisdom. But if you can think about a tree of the afflictions, and you have the axe of wisdom, right? So your feet are stable on the ground with morality, yeah, and you need stable hands of concentration. Yeah, so you need the stable groundwork of morality. You need the stableness of concentration, because without concentration, your meditation is not very powerful, right? And then with those strong hands of concentration, you can cut the tree, yeah, of the afflictions, you know, with a sharp axe of wisdom. Yeah. So yeah, so you can see it's a build-up aspect, right? The three higher training: first morality, then concentration, and then the wisdom, realizing emptiness. Yeah, we talked about before with refuge, remember? When we talk about refuge, what is the actual Dharma refuge? Was the wisdom directly realizing emptiness. So that's when we talked about the Four Noble Truths, when we talked about the fourth noble truth, right? The true paths, remember? What was the true path? A mind that directly realizes emptiness. That's this sharp axe that can eliminate ignorance. So you need to develop, when we say taking refuge, the actual refuge is the refuge into the Dharma, right? The real safe direction is the refuge into the Dharma. And what does that mean? The refuge in the Dharma means your own mind being free of afflictions. That's the real safe direction. And your own mind having the method to do that. And that's this direct perception of emptiness. Yeah, we went a few times, we went over that into with the Four Noble Truths, and also more extensively when we did refuge, right? So you need eventually a mind directly realizing emptiness in order to cut this ignorance. Yeah, so we come to emptiness. I said before already, as soon as you hear emptiness, you should say, yes, yes, I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready. Give me emptiness. Yeah. So that mind you should try to generate, because emptiness is very challenging. It's not easy, but is one of the most, if not the most important teaching of the Buddha. Yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about in the model on emptiness. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, just you see that where we talked about the cycle of various forms of suffering in samsara, and then how we go around in that cycle by the 12 links, and then read the 12 links for yourself in the suggested readings or other kind of lamrim presentations, right? So the 12 links will take time to digest and to understand. Yeah. So then we saw that, and then we also saw that the way out are these kind of 3 higher trainings. Yeah, the 3 higher trainings helps us actually to get out of samsara. By practicing morality, you shape, in the sense you create less causes for suffering. And then with the wisdom, realizing emptiness, by the powerful, stable aspect of concentration, you can cut ignorance and afflictions. And so you create less negative karma, so there's less suffering going to come in the future. And then the previous negative deeds we've done, yeah, based on ignorance, that get purified by the realizing emptiness. Yeah, so that means previous negative karma gets purified, and we don't create new negative karma. So what happens? We go up. Yeah, because negative karma gets purified, and you don't create new negative karma, so you only go to places of more and more happiness, right? Yeah, that's kind of why this combination of these 3 higher trainings actually proves that it's possible to eliminate samsara. It's possible to achieve nirvana. It's possible to get a mind, as we said before, that you have a mind wishing nirvana, right? Or you have this mind of renunciation that doesn't want to have the suffering anymore. Yeah, that's the initial motivation of the path. Yeah, the mind of renunciation, contemplating the various types of suffering, and then you don't want that anymore. So you look for a method to get out. Yeah, and that method are the 3 higher trainings. And then you get out and you achieve nirvana. Yeah, so you have samsara, you generate a renunciation of samsara, you practice the 3 higher trainings, and then you achieve nirvana, meaning a quality of the mind, right? Nirvana is a quality of the mind, as we talked about before, is not a place somewhere in the universe, is kind of a state of mind that is free of any form of afflictions. Yeah, that's what this nirvana is all about. Yeah, so to come to that mind, you have to purify all negative karma of the past, one aspect, and you have to prevent yourself from creating new negative karma. Yeah, and then you have to eliminate this first link of the 12 links, the link of ignorance and its related afflictions, and that happens with the direct perception of emptiness. And then you can see a very sophisticated washing machine that gets rid of all stains. And then you come out and you're not in samsara anymore. Yeah, that would be a nice washing machine, but it's a very long program, I tell you. So and you're just in there, it's probably quite. Yeah, so luckily we have a much more sophisticated one in the Buddhist doctrine that, you know, it just takes a few lifetimes to study these things, meditate on it, and there you go. Right. Yeah. Sorry for that. Yeah. Yeah, but that's the way out. There's a happy end, isn't it? Yeah, I like happy ends. Yeah. Okay, let's stop there. And the happy ends is just 2 minutes over time. So yeah. Yeah. So then this is the next week is the discussion and review and yeah. So then I hanging out with my Spanish friends for some questions because most of the questions we do in English, right? So yeah. Okay. Yeah. Is there any questions? Yeah. Then we have time. Yeah.
Thank you, Gueshe. We have a question that's been sent in about emptiness.
Okay.
What makes us human? Is it the whole range of emotions like love, anger, compassion, envy, humility, hope, despair, and so on?
Yeah.
And does a person who has a direct perception and realization of emptiness become less than human?
Becomes like a vegetable. Or
detached from all positive or negative
Yeah.
emotions and lost in their own world?
Yeah.
That's the question.
Yeah. You should know that when you achieve nirvana or you become a Buddha, there's still positive emotions, right? There's love and kindness, compassion, wanting to take care for others. Yeah, that's all present. But the destructive emotions, the afflictions are not present anymore. It's not that you become a kind of a vegetable or how do you say that? Machine or something like that. No, it's kind of all the destructive emotions which are causes for suffering. They are gone. And we don't like them, so it would be nice if they are gone, right? So that's kind of, we should understand all the destructive emotions, they get eliminated, but the positive, constructive ones, they stay, right? And they get more developed. Yeah, that's why Buddha has this spontaneous compassion, for example, and spontaneous love and kindness. Yeah, so that even you see His Holiness sometimes cries. There's nothing wrong with getting emotional, but it's just where do you get emotional about? That's the question. Yeah, if you get emotional because you have just too much, you see too much suffering, you want to do something about it. That's a very constructive form of emotion, right? And that we develop. But if you get emotional because, oh, I'm sick and always me, oh, then it's just a question if that's a constructive form of thinking or not. Yeah, so that's kind of, you have to be clear that there's a difference between destructive emotions and constructive ones. And we eliminate the destructive ones and we develop the constructive ones. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, we can. Suffering of a broken leg, we cannot have that today. Yeah. Yeah.
Good evening. Thank you for everything, for everyone here. Basically, my question is, you say you see no people happy. Some of the people that are not happy, you see it. I see also Buddha people not happy too.
Buddha
Some
people.
Buddhist people.
Oh yeah.
Are not happy too.
Don't tell me that
Yeah,
Buddhist people are happy.
So basically, happiness is a choice. Yeah, you can receive grace.
Yeah.
From my opinion, as a spiritual person, it's better sparing the happiness. It's la longer.
Yeah.
So the question is, what is nirvana for you? Peace.
Yeah.
So we're born with peace.
We're
born with peace.
Yeah. Little peace.
We all born with a little peace.
Yeah.
And in the long way, we all lose it.
Yeah.
Fine. Okay. Yeah. So are we not in nirvana right now?
I'm not.
Are you not because you're intense?
Huh?
Because you're working?
No. It's because I still have afflictions in my mind.
And nirvana is if you peace.
No, we have to make a distinction between a kind of a temporary kind of peace of mind and a peace that always remains, right? So the people who have peace, our sense of peace or happiness is temporary, right? Isn't it? Yeah.
Well, I can read people when they're happy or they're peace. You can sense it, you can feel it.
Yeah.
London is a particular place where you lose your peace very quickly.
Yeah. So that means that the peace or happiness we have is temporary or not?
It is. It's a choice, and someone pushes you off.
But sometimes if you're depressed and you say, actually, I want to have peace of mind, it's a choice, but there's a choice established straight away.
But you're going quite complex because the pressure.
No, that's
you're going in a negative.
Yeah. But still, there's aspects of life. That's what you're talking about, right? There's aspects of life that are not peaceful, and that would be nice to make that peaceful or not.
Of course.
Yeah. So that's what we're talking about here. It's kind of, it's good. It's okay to have happiness. Okay to have peace of mind, but there are periods in life that are not peaceful. right? And those periods, we want to do something about it. So that's why we discussing these things. And then it's not just one lifetime, we think about lifetimes, right? So then you have to see a little bit of bigger picture, right? So of course, if you want to do more secular aspects of Buddhism and just think about this life, it's perfectly fine, right? But if you just train your mind and understand destructive emotions and apply antidotes, then there's more peace, there's more happiness. And that's what we want, right? So the peace and happiness we have is temporary. Yeah, if you like to call it nirvana, you can give whatever definition you like to give, right? But when we describe nirvana in Buddhism, it's kind of a mind that doesn't have suffering anymore. It's kind of irreversible peace and happiness, right? That there's no afflictions in the mind anymore. So that's kind of a state I think we all like to have, or not? So that's why
I mean,
yeah.
my observation is that in this planet,
Yeah.
everyone is looking for happiness.
Yeah.
But when they die, you go to the cemetery, is everyone die in peace. No one die happy.
Rest in peace. Yeah.
Yeah, rest in peace.
Yeah.
I don't want to be rest in peace. I want to be resting happy.
Yeah.
Because that's what I've been looking for all my life.
Yeah. You tell the people.
So, you know, on the end, you got it wrong.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. R-I-H, right? Yeah. Yeah. Or rest
Hello
in
there.
nirvana would be nice.
Is it on?
Right? R-I-V. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, yeah.
I just wanted to ask for some clarification,
Yeah.
actually. So basically, if you don't realize nirvana in this life, you will be then stuck in samsara, which is continuous rebirth.
Correct.
But then once you realize nirvana, you will no longer go through rebirth.
Correct.
But then you don't go somewhere else, as you described before.
It's not, it's kind of a state of mind, right? So most people, it then becomes a little more technical, but if you want to know, like the last rebirth you have, yeah, you accomplish nirvana in this life, for example. This body you have is still created from a contaminated previous life, right? So then when you die, then your consciousness goes, right? So your consciousness then abides in Pure Lands or something like that. You don't get reborn anymore. You don't have rebirth anymore, right? So your consciousness is free of any form of afflictions, yeah, and is free of any causes that can cause rebirth, because that's what nirvana is all about. So then you abide in this pure heavens, you could say, or it's not really a particular location, but it's just a very subtle body, not a physical body as we have. But the consciousness is just experiencing a bliss, nothing else. Yeah, so this kind of, you just abide, and mostly we relate with location. We say Pure Land, but also Pure Land is kind of a state of mind, right? Yeah, it's not really a location as such.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah, sure.
So, because I'm kind of confused in the sense of trying to be a compassionate being and sort of free people from suffering. So if you have realized nirvana and then you don't come back again, then you have no longer the ability to free others from suffering.
True.
So wouldn't it be better, wouldn't your preference be to come
Very
back
good.
over and over again?
So that, very good. That's what we call the bodhisattva ideal, right? That you fed up of samsara. Yeah, you want to get out of this cycle, but you also know you're just one person, and other people around you are much more in number, and they want exactly the same thing. They want happiness. They don't want suffering. So then you think, you know, I know how strong my urge is to get out of samsara, but all these beings are exactly the same. So instead of just striving for my own nirvana, I like to become a Buddha, because a Buddha, it takes a bit longer, but once you achieve the state of Buddhahood, you can have various emanations to help beings, right? So then, like His Holiness or Lama Zopa Rinpoche, we consider them as emanations of Buddhas. They're not in samsara, but they are among us. Yeah, so we say some nirvana is not a particular location, because their mind is not within samsara, right? So that means if you strive to become a Buddha, you have abilities to manifest various forms of emanations to help beings. So that's kind of, your mind is free of samsara, but you, in your part, you don't just have the mere wish, I want to become liberated, but you have the wish, I want to become a Buddha, for the benefit of all sentient beings, right? So this bodhicitta, as we're going to talk about next model, I think, right? Yeah, September. Then that's the perfect model for you then, because no, really, because that's kind of this very aspirational aspect, because just nirvana for yourself is nice to be without suffering, but wouldn't be nicer to help others to achieve the same? There's nothing to be, because also people who practice the path to nirvana, they also help others and teach others, and but then once you achieve nirvana, you're basically there, and you cannot really help others as a Buddha could do, right? So then from the beginning onwards, you generate this aspiration to become a Buddha in order to really do something for others, right? And to come back again and again to help others. So that, because it's a more sophisticated state than just near nirvana, so you have to just accumulate more courses for that. So we say you have to have a lot of accumulation of merit and wisdom over a prolonged period of time, but then you create courses for enlightenment, right? So we're going to talk that more in September. Yeah.
Thank you.
And probably October also.
I just want to jump to a question in the
rest.
chat because it's related.
Yeah.
Maybe you've partly answered it already, but it talks about our hearts in abiding nirvana.
Yeah, that's a term I didn't use yet because I thought maybe if some people are quite new, but we have two terms. Now it comes up. We have abiding nirvana and non-abiding nirvana. Yeah, so abiding nirvana is for a person who wants to get liberated themselves. Yeah, just what we just talked about, fed up with samsara, generate a wish to be free of samsara, get a realizations based on the 3 higher trainings, realize emptiness, and after 3 lifetimes, you can achieve nirvana. That is abiding nirvana because they abide in that state. They don't get out and work for the benefit of being, so to say. They don't have the capacity to do that. Yeah, that we call abiding nirvana. A Buddha is also free of samsara. Yeah, a Buddha is also free of samsara, but we call that a non-abiding nirvana. Non-abiding means that the Buddha just not merely abides in that state, but works for the benefit of beings, right? So that we call a non-abiding nirvana. So the qualities of the Buddha being free of samsara is exactly the same as a person who is liberated, or an arat, so to say. But then on top of that, the Buddha has this incredible, huge amount of qualities to benefit beings in various ways. Yeah, that's kind of, they can have infinite emanations, so to say, to help beings, So that we call a non-abiding nirvana because they don't merely abide in that nirvana, just work for the benefit of beings, although they liberated, right? Yeah? Yeah. Abiding nirvana, non-abiding nirvana. Yeah.
Gueshe, when the person's state of mind is in nirvana, does that mean it's enlightened or not?
Sometimes we say, in Tibetan, we say Janjup, right? So Janjup we can use for both aspects, liberation as enlightenment, right? But there's a difference because the mere liberation, sometimes we also say enlightened, but not full enlightenment. Yeah, if you use those Tibetan terms, Janjup, Janjup means, generally speaking, liberated. There's one aspect of it. There's more aspects of it, but one aspect is liberated. But then if you use that for liberation, then you said, but not fully enlightened, not fully liberated. Yeah, so that means fully liberated is this non-abiding nirvana or Buddhahood. Yeah, well, liberated or enlightened is just the Arhat state. But often we don't use that in English. We just say liberated and enlightened. Yeah, so enlightened is referring to the Buddha, and liberated is referring to the Arhat, and liberated is referring to this abiding nirvana, and enlightenment is referring to the non-abiding nirvana. Yeah.
When we say like Lama Rinpoche Nyangendete, that means his state is in
Yeah,
nirvana.
nirvana. It's just kind of an honorific expression we say. Then we don't say Lama Zopa Rinpoche Gompa Zosong or something like that. Right? We say Lama Zopa Namdak Deva or Jogi Ying Tim. Yeah, there's kind of an honorific term we use in Tibetan to address a teacher who is very highly realized. That is not an ordinary death, right? So then we say he goes into nirvana, but then meaning a non-abiding nirvana, because we make prayers for Rinpoche to return, right? So that's kind of a non-abiding nirvana. Yeah.
And then samsara is that the samsara, we are all in the delusions? Like we don't know what is real.
Yeah, that's
That's
one
what the
aspect of
answer.
samsara, right? It's kind of samsara is a kor, right, in Tibetan, right? So that means you go around in cyclic existence. How do you go around? Because of karma and afflictions. Yeah. Because of all these delusions we have, we make the same mistakes over and over again. And that's why we have this contaminated birth, sickness, aging, and death all the time. So that's kind of what samsara is all about. Is that like this? If you look at the drawing in that thing we sent you, and last week I think you were somewhere else, but yeah. So then just read through it and look at it. Then you can see that in the center of that drawing are the three root afflictions, or the pig, and then the snake coming out, and the pigeon coming out. In the pig is this ignorance, and then because of ignorance there's attachment, and there's anger, and that creates this constant activities in the other two circles, positive, negative activities, and that creates this rebirth in this cycle with the sufferings we just described, right? Yeah. Kor, we say in Tibetan, is like in one way, kor of samsara is a kind of a noun, right? But we say kor, then the second kor is the verb, right? That you actually circle around. Yeah.
There's a follow-up question from the Abiding Nirvana.
Yeah.
In the chat. By following the Bodhisattva path and practicing the Bodhisattva ideal of being reborn for sentient beings benefit, can we avoid this state of personal nirvana, or is there a risk we achieve this before Buddhahood?
It just depends where you put the main emphasis on in the beginning of your practice. If you put your practice, we studied the Lamrim, right? So in the Lamrim, it's very clear. Terminology is very clear. You know, we say the motivation in accordance with the middling scope, for example. So that means you have a motivation in accordance with, of accordance with. That means your actual motivation is Buddhahood. But in order to generate bodhicitta, you have to have renunciation, because without renunciation, there's no compassion. Compassion is defined as a mind that wishes others to be free of suffering, right? If you don't understand suffering yourself and you don't have a wish to be free of suffering, how can you have the wish for others? So you need contemplations upon again and again the suffering of samsara, and you generate certain, wishes to get liberated. That's fine, but before it becomes a spontaneous realization, before it's kind of spontaneous with you day and night, you also practice bodhicitta, and then you practice bodhicitta a bit more, and then you make sure that bodhicitta becomes the first spontaneous realization, right? And then there's no danger anymore, because if you have bodhicitta, you only want to go to enlightenment, right? And then you realize emptiness, there you go. And then it doesn't degenerate anymore. So you don't fall back out of the path, so you don't fall back to abiding nirvana, right? So bodhicitta is the key.
Okay. Thank you, Manoa. Okay, they had some more, but I think they're satisfied with that answer. So there we go.
Okay.
Anais, you have your hand raised. Would you like to ask your question?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Inshallah. Sorry, I cannot connect my camera, but I have a question. So, let me see if I get it right. So, beings who are enlightened are deeply compassionate, therefore under realized emptiness.
Sorry, can you talk a bit slower, because your voice is breaking up quite a bit?
Yeah. So, beings who are enlightened, they are deeply compassionate. I mean, this is the root of the enlightenment, I think. So they realize.
Maybe can you put it in the chat? It sounds like you're bubbling underwater or something.
Oh, okay. Sorry for that. Let me try with another sound, like the baby.
Yeah, say something.
Is this better?
Oh, much better. You sound
Okay.
like you're snorkeling or something.
No. So thank you. Sorry for that. So beings that have achieved enlightenment, they are deeply compassionate, right? So they realize emptiness, and I understand that they know that us, the rest of the beings, are in suffering.
Yeah.
We are suffering.
Yeah.
Is this not painful for them?
Yeah.
And if it is,
Mm.
if I understand correctly,
Yeah.
they feel pain for us, but they don't suffer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is why they choose to stick around, or like,
Yeah.
is the pain, is our pain, like the pain of unrealized beings?
Yeah.
You get what I say?
I get perfectly what you're saying. Yeah. So it depends which level of realization that person is, right? There's a kind of a path, as we call, if you generate bodhicitta, you enter the paths. Yeah. That is still suffering. Initially, there's still suffering for the person, not just the suffering of compassion, but also other forms of suffering, banging your head against the wall or something like that. You still feel, right? But then when you increase on the paths, then when you become an Arya being, so to say, when you have a direct perception of emptiness, then your body is kind of it's much less suffering present. It's kind of a mental body or a subtle body, in the sense not being contaminated by causes anymore, right? After some point.
I understand, but I mean, is it not painful for?
Let me finish. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. And then if you have compassion, you even see its wholeness sometimes crying, right? So there is an emotion, but the emotion of compassion, there is a little bit of kind of a wish to help, and you cannot, because you cannot straight away help all sentient beings, right?
Yes.
So there's a kind of a little bit kind of, you want, but you can't, and that gives a little bit of a mental, a little bit, you could say, suffering to a certain extent, but it's a very constructive one, because it moves you in a direction to do something about it, if you're still on the path, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So then, so then it motivates you to walk harder with more effort in that direction. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then if you develop more and more, then you can deal with suffering much better. People can cut your arms off or your legs off, and you don't get angry, or you don't get disturbed anymore.
Yeah.
That kind of development we're talking about, right?
It's kind of as if you chose this feeling in order to stick around and help others, right?
Exactly, because that is your motivation, right? If you the compassion is what we're going to see next model, is a substantial cause for bodhicitta, right?
Yeah.
So to have this wish for others to be free of suffering, and you see suffering and get emotional about it, because it's not just, you have to make sure it's a constructive form of compassion, not just the pity feeling, something like that.
Yeah.
That's very important, because the constructive form of compassion is a very much more constructive than just have a pity feeling, right? So
Yes.
we're going to talk about it next in September, so to say.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, last one, Abelardo.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. My question is very much related to the previous questioner.
Okay.
In my life, when I've gone through periods of a lot of suffering, the motivation has clearly been to want to escape, from having to be reborn again. But now I'm in a stage where I have much more clearer sense of wanting enlightenment for the sake of other beings, and I don't even think about escaping towards a nirvana or something like it. It's just flowing with life and whatever, wherever I have to go, but always trying to keep the right, let's say, frame of mind, the right direction. Is that more or less what you're also saying to us now?
Yeah, that's true, right? That's kind of that's kind of the direction, in the sense of wanting to become a Buddha yourself, and to have this initial kind of motivation to become a Buddha in order to help others, right? Yeah, so that's very precious, very good motivation. So we're going to talk about more in September, and then it's good to have that wish, but it's also good to enhance it and to make it stronger, that it eventually transform into a spontaneous presence in your mind, right? What we call a realization. And that you day and night have this compassion, day and night you generate bodhicitta, and you never let go anymore. and it never degenerates anymore. That's what we have to eventually develop, right? So how to do that? Like and subscribe or something like that. Not joking. See you in September. Yeah, we're going to talk about in great detail in September. Yeah, sorry, this my friends told me that, and now I did it without asking, and just straight from my memory. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So that's it for today. Yeah. So that's dedicate. Very auspicious to think about bodhicitta in the end. Oh, no. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. So try dedicate in that direction that yourself and all sentient beings want to basically achieve the state of non-abiding nirvana, and to do that we have to progress on the state of the path, and we make strong prayers in that direction. So yeah, for the spreading of these teachings, and beings may come in contact and quickly attain this stage of enlightenment, and then also for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who is the founder, one of the founders or spiritual directors of this organization, and to help us and guide us, and also make strong prayers in that direction. And then of course generate the wish to achieve bodhicitta, the realization of the minds of enlightenment, wanting to become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings, and then also try to dedicate for emptiness, as that is needed to eliminate ignorance. So now is the last day for this period. So in summer break, next week you have another session, but then in the summer break try to review the material, try to read a bit of the Lamrim, right, and then you're well prepared for, in particular, the bodhicitta section, if you like, and things we covered. Try to review a little bit in the summer break in August, if you're not on the beach at home or something like that. Then try to go in that direction, and then now we dedicate for the all to come through. So try to dedicate in those lines. Japa Jetson Lozan Japa Yi Tempe Nikbo Rindu Zelje Jo. May the glorious Guru's life belong and stable. May all beings equal in status have happiness. May I and others, without exception, accumulate merit, purify negativity, and may we be blessed to quickly attain Buddhahood. Sundan Gyur Mizin Pachiki Den Jel Tempe Tem Den Yer Shu Janju Semcho Rinpoche Magye Panan Gige Shi Kieba Nyamba Meba Yang Gone Gonde Bewa Shu Doni Dawa Rinpoche Magye Panan Gige Shi Kieba Nyamba Meba Yang Gone Gonde Bewa Shu. Okay, enjoy your evening, and then your next week review discussion thing, and then enjoy your summer break, and be good. And see you on the other side, and don't die. Okay, okay, thank you.